By the time anyone realized, 3 entire shipping containers, worth $14 million, were already gone. And the man responsible? He was standing right there, waving them goodbye. But here's the part no one could explain. Every single security camera showed the containers leaving the port legally, signed off by the same man who stole them. Stay with me, because the way he fooled an entire international port authority will make you rethink what secure really means. Jackson Cade's hands trembled as he operated the massive crane through 60-mile-per-hour winds. Container MSKU 5334, worth $4.2 million in conflict diamonds, swayed dangerously 40 feet above the churning water. One wrong move and everything would be over. His radio crackled. "Jackson, this is Victor. I know you're there. I know what you're doing." Victor Kozlov's voice cut through the hurricane winds like a blade. "You have 30 seconds before I call the Coast Guard." Jackson's finger hovered over the crane controls. Below him, the transport barge waited in the darkness, engines running. Behind him, footsteps echoed on the metal walkway. Victor was climbing up to the crane platform. 20 seconds, Jackson. Think about your family." But Jackson was thinking about other families. Thousands of them. Children as young as 8 years old, forced to dig diamonds from Sierra Leone mines while Victor bought yachts with the profits. His son Marcus would walk again because of the surgery this money would fund. But more importantly, 2,847 young miners would be freed when this evidence reached international authorities. The crane lurched in a wind gust. The container swung wildly, cables screaming under tension. Victor's flashlight beam swept across the platform. 10 seconds. Jackson slammed the release. Container MSKU 5334 dropped onto the barge with a thunderous crash. The barge pilot gunned the engines, disappearing into the hurricane darkness with $4.2 million in blood diamonds. Victor burst onto the platform, making a threatening gesture. "You just destroyed everything." Jackson turned to face him, rain streaming down his face. "Number, I just saved thousands of children." 6 months earlier, Jackson Cade was just another invisible dock worker at the Port of Houston. 52 years old, divorced, working for $67,000 a year while moving $200 million in cargo every month. Nobody questioned his movements. Nobody paid attention to the guy operating the cranes. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon when Jackson ducked behind a shipping container to eat lunch and accidentally overheard Victor Kozlov on his phone. "Yes, the Sierra Leone shipment arrived," Victor said in accented English. Industrial machinery cover story worked perfectly. $3.2 million in uncut stones, grade A conflict diamonds. Jackson froze. Sierra Leone. Conflict diamonds. He'd heard those terms before. Conflict minerals that funded wars and exploited children. 3 hours later, his phone rang. "Mr. Cade, this is Dr. Martinez. I'm afraid insurance denied Marcus's surgery. Without private payment of $180,000, we can't proceed. The nerve damage window closes in 8 weeks." Jackson stared at the medical bill. His 19-year-old son Marcus had been paralyzed from the waist down in a construction accident. This experimental surgery was his only chance to walk again. "Hun, how long do I have to get the money?" 8 weeks maximum. After that, the damage becomes permanent. Jackson hung up and looked across the port at Victor's containers. Industrial machinery that wasn't machinery at all. That night, Jackson did what he did best: logistics analysis. He pulled up shipping manifests on his work computer, cross-referencing Victor's containers with legitimate machinery shipments. The discrepancies jumped out immediately. Container MSKU-4791 from Antwerp was listed as industrial printing equipment, 47,000 pounds. But Jackson had handled real printing equipment before. Those machines were distributed across the entire container. Heavy base units, lighter electronics, spare parts. Victor's container showed concentrated weight in the center, like precious cargo packed in protective cases. Jackson dug deeper. Victor Kozlov, officially listed as Port Liaison for Specialized Industrial Imports. His containers arrived monthly from Antwerp's Diamond District, routed through shell companies with names like European Industrial Solutions and Benelux Equipment Trading, companies that existed only on paper. The shipping fees told another story. Victor's containers paid special handling charges in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin transfers that bypassed traditional banking. Real machinery importers used corporate accounts and letters of credit. Criminals used crypto. Jackson pulled up satellite images of the Antwerp Port District. Victor's containers originated from warehouses in the Diamond Quarter, not industrial zones. The buildings were registered to gemstone trading companies, not equipment manufacturers. For 3 weeks, Jackson studied Victor's operation with military precision. His Navy logistics training kicked in. Pattern recognition, supply chain analysis, security vulnerability assessment. Victor was running a textbook smuggling operation, hiding behind legitimate port infrastructure. Jackson mapped Victor's schedule. Container inspections every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Security camera reviews every Friday. Staff meetings with Port Authority officials every other Wednesday. Victor was methodical, professional, but he had blind spots. The security cameras were Jackson's biggest obstacle. Victor had installed additional surveillance around his containers, but Jackson knew the port's electrical grid. He'd helped install the original camera system 5 years ago. Every camera had a backup power source, but they all routed through the same junction box. A simple electrical malfunction could disable surveillance for several minutes. Jackson studied the weight distribution data more carefully. Each container held between 15 and 20 identical cases, roughly 2,500 pounds each. Not heavy enough for industrial machinery, but perfect for briefcases full of diamonds. Based on diamond density calculations, each case could hold $200,000 to $400,000 in uncut stones. The math was staggering. Victor was moving $3 to $8 million per container, 12 times per year. Over $50 million annually in conflict minerals, flowing through the port of Houston under the cover of industrial equipment imports. Jackson cross-referenced shipping dates with conflict reports from Sierra Leone. Victor's shipments increased during periods of intensive mining activity. When underage worker recruitment spiked in diamond regions, Victor's imports doubled. The correlation was undeniable. But what destroyed Jackson emotionally was finding the end buyers. Victor's diamonds were sold to jewelry manufacturers who asked no questions about origin. The same stones mined by 8-year-old children ended up in engagement rings and luxury watches. American consumers were unknowingly funding forced labor. Jackson printed everything: shipping manifests, payment records, warehouse addresses, buyer information. He created a complete dossier of Victor's operation, enough evidence to shut down the entire network. But evidence wouldn't pay for Marcus's surgery. That's when Jackson made his decision. He would steal from the smugglers, take just enough for Marcus's surgery, then expose the entire operation to international authorities. The children forced to mine these diamonds deserved justice, but his son deserved to walk again. Jackson had 17 years of port experience, security clearance, and intimate knowledge of every system Victor used. He knew exactly how to breach the containers without detection. The question wasn't whether he could obtain the diamonds, it was whether he could live with his actions to save his son and expose exploitative mining. 2 weeks later, during a night shift, Jackson made his move. He'd studied container MSKU-4791 for 3 days, mapping security camera angles and timing. There was a 90-second blind spot during shift change. He opened the container during that window. Inside weren't industrial machines. Briefcases, dozens of them. Jackson opened one with shaking hands. Diamonds, hundreds of uncut stones worth millions. He took one small diamond and closed everything back up. The next day, through a Navy contact in Galveston, he sold it for $12,000, enough for 1 month of Marcus's medical bills. Victor never noticed. Jackson realized the diamonds weren't individually cataloged. Victor just counted briefcases. But Jackson's 90-second window disappeared when Victor installed additional security cameras. So Jackson adapted. He spent 2 weeks studying the new camera system and discovered Victor's monitoring app had a 30-second refresh delay. For his second theft, Jackson needed more money. He triggered an electrical malfunction that disabled cameras for 3 minutes, took an entire briefcase worth $85,000, and replaced it with similar weight machinery parts. This time, Tommy, the security guard's patrol, arrived 30 seconds early. Jackson dove under a forklift and lay motionless for 15 minutes while Tommy investigated the electrical problems. The next morning, Victor noticed the substitution immediately. He didn't know who, but he knew someone with port access was stealing from him. He hired private security and started varying his inspection schedule. Jackson now had $97,000. He needed $83,000 more. That's when Carmen, his ex-wife, served custody papers. I'm taking the kids to Oregon next Friday. Marcus can get into a different trial program there. Jackson couldn't let that happen. He planned his biggest theft yet, $150,000 from container MSKU 5156. He would use a thunderstorm as cover. During the storm, Jackson executed perfectly. False weather alerts cleared the area. He opened the container during a 12-minute security gap and took the briefcase. But Victor arrived to personally check his containers. Jackson was still inside MSKU 5156 when Victor's key turned in the lock. Jackson hid behind diamond crates in complete darkness, while Victor inspected with a flashlight. Lightning crashed as Victor's beam passed inches from Jackson's face. Victor sensed something wrong, but the storm forced him to leave. Convinced someone was systematically robbing him, Victor installed motion sensors inside containers, hired 24/7 security guards, and began random inspections. Jackson now had enough money for Marcus's surgery, but he realized if he stopped stealing now, Victor would connect the dots. The thefts stopping right when Jackson got his surgery money would be too obvious. So Jackson planned a fourth theft, this one under FBI surveillance, because Victor had reported industrial equipment theft to federal agents. Jackson created a fake emergency crane malfunction requiring container relocation. He disabled motion sensors for a safety inspection and coordinated timing with guard shift changes and FBI surveillance rotation. But everything went wrong. The guard radio check happened early. Jackson answered using Victor's radio. An FBI agent arrived for surprise inspection while Jackson was inside the container. The motion sensor reactivated early, triggering a silent alarm. Victor received the alert and raced to the port while Jackson was still stealing. Jackson completed the theft with Victor's car pulling into the parking lot, then pretended to conduct routine crane maintenance when Victor arrived 90 seconds later. Victor set a trap. He spread false information about a valuable container arriving Friday, but actually moved it to Wednesday. Jackson fell for it. He arrived to steal from container MSKU 5334 based on the false information. The container was empty except for tracking devices and cameras. Victor and the FBI were monitoring from hidden positions, but Jackson discovered the trap just in time. Using the container's monitoring equipment, he hacked Victor's communication system and overheard conversations about conflict diamonds in Sierra Leone operations. That's when Jackson learned the full scope. $340 million in conflict minerals smuggled over 2 years. Funds used to purchase weapons for young miners. A network of 15 shell companies laundering illegal mineral profits. Victor entered the container to confront Jackson directly. "I know it's you," Victor said. "You've stolen over $400,000 from my operations. Your operations fund exploitative mining in Sierra Leone," Jackson replied. "I heard everything." They stared at each other. Both men had evidence to destroy the other. Jackson offered a deal. "I keep what I already took from my son's surgery. You let me take the big shipment arriving tomorrow worth $4.2 million. In exchange, I don't expose your mineral trafficking network to international authorities." Victor agreed, but Jackson overheard him on the phone arranging for Jackson to disappear permanently after the final theft. So, Jackson prepared his ultimate countermove. He programmed a delayed upload of all mineral trafficking evidence to international authorities. If Victor eliminated him, the evidence would still get out. Hurricane Francine provided perfect cover for the final heist. Evacuation protocols meant minimal security. Container movements could be explained as storm protection measures. Jackson overrode all security systems using Victor's own access codes. He created a false hurricane emergency requiring container relocation and used storm conditions to mask crane operations. But Victor arrived despite evacuation orders to protect his final shipment. As Jackson operated the crane through hurricane winds, Victor climbed up to the platform. "You've destroyed everything," Victor shouted over the wind. "That network employed hundreds of people. It enslaved thousands of children," Jackson shouted back. They fought on the crane platform 40 feet above ground. Victor slipped during a wind gust and fell. Jackson completed the final theft as Hurricane Francine made landfall. His delayed upload program activated as he escaped. Complete evidence of the mineral trafficking network went to 73 news organizations, the FBI Organized Crime Unit, the International Criminal Court, and the Sierra Leone government. The story dominated global headlines despite the hurricane. Port worker takes millions to expose exploitative mining. Victor's passing triggered complete exposure of the network. Shell companies were traced to warlords and weapons dealers. Port officials were arrested on racketeering charges. $500 million in conflict mineral assets were frozen internationally. Marcus got his surgery and walked again. International prosecutors offered Jackson complete immunity in exchange for testimony. His evidence led to historic convictions. 47 cartel members sentenced for serious crimes, 2,847 children freed from forced labor in diamond mines. Jackson was hired as Director of Maritime Security for the reformed Port of Houston Authority. Salary, $175,000. Mission, implementing the CADE protocols for conflict mineral detection at ports worldwide. 2 years later, Marcus, now fully recovered and walking, visited the memorial at Port of Houston dedicated to free child soldiers. Jackson watched from his office as his son placed flowers at the monument. The inscription read, "Freedom Port, where every child's life matters more than profit." Jackson had stolen $18.4 million in conflict diamonds. In return, he'd saved nearly 3,000 children from slavery and dismantled a network that funded wars across 3 continents. Sometimes breaking the law is the only way to restore justice. Subscribe if you think sometimes good people have to break bad rules to protect innocent lives. Hit that like button if you believe Jackson was a hero, not a criminal. And tell me in the comments, if your child needed life-saving surgery and you discovered your workplace was funding exploitative mining, would you have the courage to do what Jackson did? What would you risk to save thousands of children?